All right, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight's webinar. My name is Eugene, and I am the co-CEO of Reflective Learning. And together with Karen, we set up this webinar to share some of the experiences over the last few months of this lockdown period. I hope that you've got something warm with you. I know different parts of the country. It's sitting in Cape Town where I'm sitting. It's rather cold. But hopefully tonight will be a chance for us to share some of our experiences and some of our learnings through this lockdown period. I know that 2020 has been quite a roller coaster for teachers and for education in general. I mean, across the world, we've had more than 1.3 billion learners out of school. And particularly here in South Africa, starting in January with what we thought was going to be a normal school year, then suddenly in the second term, or over the Easter period, being forced into distance learning. And now we're kind of in this half in, half out phase, and then ultimately returning to school. And I think for us, as we're kind of planning for this webinar, to be able to ask the question, what can we pull out of this period? That's something that we're going to learn, that we're going to take into our teaching, into our classrooms in the future. And so sort of in the words of the old adage, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think that's where this webinar has sort of come out of. That's hopefully we can pull some positives out of the last few months and actually see how perhaps the experiment of 2020 has actually opened our eyes to new possibilities and new potentials that we can take into our day-to-day teaching. So perhaps just to share a little bit about how this evening is going to work. The first half of the session is going to be sharing from our different panelists, who I'll introduce in a moment. And then the second half is going to be looking at the Q&A. So you will see that as part of this, there's the chat function. If you want to be able to, as we're going along, send through your questions. We'll populate it on our side and try to get to as many of them as possible, and hopefully make it interactive in that sort of way. We also have a program that we'd love to be able to send some questions your way. So I'm just popping into the chat something now, so www.menti.com. If you go to that either on your phone or on a new tab on your website, you'll be able to click on that, put in that code, and you'll be able to see some interactive questions that we send your way, and we'll be able to populate that. So just as a test, for instance, I will show you our first question, which is quite simply, where are you across South Africa? And so you can see some of the answers rolling in. So if you want to give that a test just to get us going, I'm going to set down just a sort of a countdown. So we have 30 seconds to going with that until we hand over. But also just to say that we will be recording the webinar, so if you have some colleagues that perhaps weren't able to make it, that's perfectly fine. We'll send it out and you'll be able to pass it along. But if you could keep yourself muted through the process, just so we can keep some order in this. So without further ado, let me introduce our 4 panelists for this evening, and perhaps they can wave when I start speaking about them. So our first person that is going to be sharing with us is Karen Walstra, and Karen is highly experienced in education and technology. She has a master's in education, looking at educational technology, and a PhD candidate currently looking at virtual reality in primary schools. She's taught from grade R right up to grade 11. She's been a principal. She's lectured across the country and even worked for Google. So, but at heart, she's a teacher who loves to have fun, loves to enjoy whilst innovating in education. So that's a little bit about Karen. Then we'll be hearing from Moira Gundu. So Moira, after getting her PGCE, went on to get a master's in information science, looking at the impact of literacy on food security. She's been involved in learning design at both St. Stithians and St. Albans over the past 10 years, and also as a lecturer and researcher. And her particular passion is around knowledge sharing in society and literacy. Then we have Frankie Cilliers, who will be sharing His education career has spanned over the last 11 years. He's been a teacher, a principal, a marketing manager currently, a managing director of EduElevate, and at the same time has also fulfilled one of my wife's lifelong wishes to run a fudge factory. So he'll be sharing a little bit about his story and really his mission to be able to impact whole school communities and bring innovation to education. And then last but not least, I'll be sharing with my colleague will be sharing, Tracy Butchart. So Tracy has been in education for the last 30 years as a maths and science teacher, ended up leaving the classroom after starting a business that took off and was looking at assessment software that was taken up at 3 different provinces across the country. She has a master's of maths education and is currently working toward a PhD, looking at the link between metacognition and accelerated improvement in mathematics. And she believes that teaching is ultimately about helping learners become independent, self-sustaining, lifelong learners. So without further ado, I'm going to stop my rambling on from there and hand over to Karen, who's going to be sharing a little bit about her experiences and her insights looking at the lockdown period. So over to you, Karen.
Hello, everybody. It's so exciting looking at the number of people. We're sitting on 88 people in the chat. So if you can't find me in between all the faces, if you look at the top right-hand side of your screen and you then see all the little people where it says 88, click on that, then go down until you find my name. Click on the little drop-down arrow next to that. Don't throw me out of the call. If you then click on the little thing that looks like a drawing pin, what it does is it makes the person big. So if you click on the pin next to the person, under the person's name when we're speaking, then that person will be big on your screen. I hope that helps. So what have I seen in the last while? Well, for me, I've been on a really interesting journey in terms of engaging with teachers, listening to what teachers have been saying, having sessions with children because I run some online courses and coding groups with children. And so what are the things that I've been seeing? So I think some of the first things that started coming to mind for me was seeing how the divide in terms of having technology and not having technology has really impacted how children actually learn and engage in this time. And for me, the question is, how do we address this? How do we actually change it so that every learner in every school across our country can have a device and that they can take home, but take home safely? So those are huge questions, but I do think that they're things that we shouldn't just pretend they're not there. The other thing that I've seen is that where schools have used technology, where they were using technology before the lockdown, that when the lockdown came, those schools found it really easy to slip into the remote learning because those teachers were comfortable with the technology. They'd been playing with the technology. Their children were comfortable with the technology. And so their lessons almost continued seamlessly. You then had other schools which were sort of an in-between. You had some teachers who were using technology, who had been exploring with the technology, and those teachers flew. But in the same school, you had teachers who hadn't touched the technology, were still using paper-based information. And so those teachers themselves found themselves thrown into a huge quandary. And the pressure on those teachers was huge. They were now having to cope with, how do we use this technology? How do I get to engage with my students? The pressure was from the school to say you need to engage. Then there was another group of schools which didn't use technology, but started using things like WhatsApps. And so you have a big group of people who have been engaging with their students via WhatsApp and trying to get teaching using WhatsApps. And there were a whole lot of learnings around that. And then you had another group of schools which thought the lockdown was only going to be for 2 or 3 weeks, and frantically printed off notes and things for their students, send home resources because they knew that they were not going to get to their students. And so they thought that the resources they'd sent were enough. And so you had principals and teachers really frustrated because they couldn't actually get to their students, and that the resources that they had at school in terms of details that parents had given them, parents had changed and never updated at school, and so they couldn't actually communicate with these parents. And so there was this huge frustration. And then there's another group of schools that didn't even get to giving their students notes, didn't use technology, and so those children were just left to their parents or people who were caregivers trying to cope with how do we are in this space. So our country has this wide range of learnings, and each of them is valuable, and each of them we can learn something from. And I think it's how do we actually take these learnings and turn them into positives. First of all, I think that as teachers, one, you should be all smiling, and you should all be congratulating yourselves. If I look at the pictures, lots of you look very serious. And I know we're all pulling our hair out and we're going, what are we doing with this space? How are we coping? But reflect on yourself. Think how you have grown, and think what you have learned. Whatever space you're in, whichever one of those you fit into, we've all had learnings. We've all thought about how we could improve this. If this happens again, what could we do? So don't forget those learnings and really take those to heart in terms of where your own journey is going. Then the things that you've heard around the news and the things that you've heard that have been working, take those learnings and go back to your school leadership and say, how can we make this work? What are the things that we can do? How do we get data to all our students? How do we get devices to our students? How do we get these things to become possible? How do I learn to use the technologies as a teacher? And so I think that we've got to each take our own story and see what was valuable for me. The learnings from a learner's side has also been interesting. The children that have been on the web and have been learning individually, there are interesting things that have come out there. Children are loving the online learning. They're loving that they can actually work at their own pace. They're loving that when they want to stop working, they can stop working. So a question that's been in my head for years is, do we need timetables the way we need timetables? Do we actually need children at school all the time? For years, I've been thinking, no, we don't. And this has just shown me, no, we don't. We could be using our schools and doubling our numbers with the existing buildings that we've got. So it's, how do we take the spaces that you've got? Rosemary, could you mute yourself, please? How could we take our spaces and actually then see how do we actually turn it into a positive? The other things children are loving is that they're getting more individualized attention in lots of places. They're loving the one-on-one chats with their teachers, that they can actually now, in a webinar, sit and talk to a teacher on their own. They're finding that really valuable. We shouldn't lose that. So those are the kinds of learnings we need to really take and say, what has worked? What's been difficult? How do we improve this? But for me, it's going back to you as teachers. You are the key, the absolute key in all of this education thing. The technology shows us that children do not want to just engage in technology. So yes, they're missing the socialization. They're missing the physical contacts. But as we're slowly going back into schools, and we've now got these really weird classrooms, we need to really help our children to cope. How do we make the space fun? The space with masks, the space with plastic all around us, with children being saying, sit on that square and don't move. Is that what we want? Or do we turn it into, no, you can jiggle. No, you can get up and move a little bit around. But how do we make the space? How do we actually check the distance? Turn it into a fun thing. I'm hearing now as we're rolling back that there's some little children who are saying, I don't want to go to school. I'm scared of going to school because all I'm hearing is don't. How do we turn that? How do we turn this difficult space into a better space? So for me, it's what did we learn? And we've all learned different things. Every single one of you has learned something meaningful. Hold on to that. Grow your own skills. Don't stop learning the technology just because it might go away. Don't let it go away. Technology can save you time. It can really save you time. Technology can mean you can engage with your students really differently, but well. Technology means you can have personalized, individualized learning, which as a teacher is very difficult to do. So those are some of the things that I've seen, that I've heard. In the chat, put your comments. We'd love to hear what you're saying, what your learnings were and your engagements. Thanks for letting me share.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. You mentioned a little bit about using this time as teachers to grow our skills and to grow our sort of interaction on the internet and so on, and using devices and that. What do you feel like is quite a nice entry point? Maybe if you're a teacher who hasn't explored all that much around technology and you've now been forced into the situation where you have to, are there some tools, are there some places that you think you could quite easily get to pull off some of those easy learnings? Or how do we go about sharing what we've learned with each other at the end of the day?
So yes, there are easy ones. One, I'm assuming you're not hand drawing worksheets anymore. You're not writing them, are you? You're not? Hey? Well, if you are, please don't be. Okay, so learn the tools whichever your school is using. Whether you're a Google school or a Microsoft school or an Apple school, learn those tools. Get to know them inside out. Get to play with them. That's the first thing. And then start exploring other things. Play on your phone. How many apps have you downloaded that are educational? Go into the App Store and just type in your topic, type in your subject and see what pops up. Play with the technology that you've got. See the things that are meaningful to you. We don't all need all technology. If you're a maths teacher, you don't need the same technology as the English teacher. There might be things that overlap, but actually it's quite different. You should use spreadsheets and those kinds of things as a math teacher, whereas a language teacher would want to use all the language type tools. So find what's suitable for you. Look at the resources your school is paying for already. There are lots. So it might be a Mathletics, it might be a Purple Mash, it might be a Reading Eggs, it might be, get to know those tools. Find the ones that are already in your school system and then find free ones. But play. You can see I've got gray hair, but I love playing. Age is just the mindset. So play. That's my advice.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you. It kind of reminds me of Professor Dick Nkambi from UCT, who his kind of belief around teachers actually getting a chance to play with technology before being placed in a situation of pressure of almost being up in front of people, but having the opportunity to use it at home, get it into your everyday life actually before you bring it into the classroom, so that by the time you come in, you feel comfortable with what you're using. Okay, so next we're going to hand over to Moira. And Moira is going to be, on tomorrow, and Moira is going to be sharing a little bit about knowledge management, the power of relationship, and being really intentional about the soft skills over sort of distance learning. Yes, but before we get there, somebody's just reminded me, in terms of the next slide on Mentimeter, you'll have a chance to perhaps answer a question that Karen would like to put to you. It says, what would you like to continue doing, or what will you implement due to what you've learned from the lockdown period? So if you want to take just a minute or two to answer that as it comes through, you'll see some of the answers will pop up onto the screen, and I'll share my screen so that you can see some of what is coming through. What would you continue doing, or what would you implement now due to what you've learned from the lockdown period? Okay, so we've got use Google Classroom to communicate memos and notes. So we've got online facilitation with a standard of all our courses. So working with technology, using Google Drive and the apps that are sitting within the Google space, teaching online, creating instructional videos, continuing to use Google Meet, which is what you're using at the moment, bringing up more professional development tools, playing, learning, new tools, flexible work weeks to the school timetable, uploading content to children's Google account, allowing self-learning and growth, look seriously into online assessments, try and avoid the marking, flexible learning time. And before lockdown, we're using Google Classroom. That way, I can almost have 100% sort of away from paper-based tasks. So you can see that there's a lot of people that are using Google Classroom as a base. But I think again, there's lots of opportunity to explore different aspects. So I mean, this one tool that you're using at the moment is called Mentimeter. And there is some free kind of ability to run this, and this could be something actually quite nice to work with in a classroom setting as well. But I think there are just so many tools out there, and it's about trying to explore what some of those things are. And I think Frankie might touch on a couple of things a little bit later. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Moira, and so if you'd like to take it away, Moira.
Thanks, Eugene. Can you all hear me? Just wave. So my experience, some of the things that Karen observed or learned from lockdown overlap to my experience as well. But what I saw from my school was, yes, we were using technology, and we had rumblings of coronavirus since as far back as December, but we had dismissed it as maybe a hoax. And then March came, it was reality, and we had to change the way we do things. I think our response was panic. We are going online now. We've been using online, but now going going online full time was also a curveball that was not expected. So it presented challenges, but teamwork helped save the situation. But what I then observed as well was we, as a school, invested a lot in relationships with our kids, with our students. We kept checking, we wanted to, and there was emphasis on making sure that the students are fine, check on the parents, how are they coping, because it was also a challenge for parents. And it made me observe that we were doing all the right things. And because COVID-19, another challenge with COVID-19 was that it made us reliant on information, and information that we didn't know where it was coming from, and information that we didn't even know how to verify whether it's true or not. So looking at teachers and how they responded, it was all giving. And what about us? We forgot that we are also a resource that could be tapped into. We became powerless. We didn't see that power in ourselves. I'll quickly share my a few slides and speak to them. So there was a lot of uncertainty and anxiety, and would always wait for the next staff meeting to hear what is happening. And global trends just changed, and now information was coming from a global, from a very macro level to a micro level. Would wait for the National Center for Disease, and maybe check what is America doing, what is the AU saying, what is the Ministry of Health, the Department of Health saying, what is the National Center of Communicable Diseases saying. Then it comes down to the principals, and then it comes to the staff meeting. And the economy shifted. We were all at home, and as teachers, we're wondering what's going to happen to us. Are we still going to have our salaries? How are we going to stay ahead of the competition? Maybe there's going to be retrenchment. And of course, there's a change of organizational forms in terms of we were working from home now. So do we need to go to work? And do we need the numbers that we have now at work? And of course, information took over. So the questions that we then started asking, because now the environment has changed, in fact. How do we stay ahead of the competition as schools? How do we maximize our organizational potential? And there are so many competing forces out there. As schools, now our fight to remain relevant is even tougher than it was before. How do we stay relevant vis-a-vis homeschooling? Maybe parents have seen that actually students our children staying at home and learning from home is actually okay. So how do we keep the figures coming to school? How do we manage our intellectual capital when they are away from school? And at the same time achieve organizational efficiency, because it's a reality. We are going to have people time off sick, or people off in self-isolation. All these things have affected school as usual, business as usual. So what are some of the things that we can do among ourselves as teachers is to offer each other support, and connectedness became very important. For instance, my principal at some stage stopped writing to us and referring to us as colleagues. He would say, dear friends, because at that point we felt like we had each other. Our fears and his fears were the same. And as teams working together, we sort of learned that continuing to work in silos cannot be sustained. So some of the things that I would suggest was teachers investing in knowledge sharing strategies in our spaces. How do we do that? Besides staff development, what other support that do you have? You have each other. So some strategies could be storytelling, sharing your experiences, joining a community of practice as maths teachers, as IT teachers, as history teachers. What are those things that bring you together? As history, geography, how do you collaborate? You could create work groups in your schools, working collaborating on projects. I'm well invested in inquiry-based learning, whose premise is that, you know what, working in silos does not really benefit our kids, but collaborating between subjects, there is more to learn than working in individual silos, where time permits and the structure of the school day. Of course, we have meetings, but coffee group meetings. During break, can you share and compare notes, have each other, cover each other's back? And what could be some of the favorable conditions for successful work away from school? Is to keep the communication going, invest in a tribe, have a tribe, a group of people that until the next staff development day, you can ask questions. You can afford to be vulnerable. You can afford to tell, this is not working with me, I need help. And for it to work, you need a meaningful and shared purpose. You need to have specific goals. You need a clear working approach. That's one thing that COVID-19 has taught us. When we were introduced to protocols, they just kicked in and it worked like clockwork. And we can do the same thing with our processes. We need to have that mutual accountability to help each other, have a commitment to help the next person, have team trust, and you cannot emphasize collaboration more. And some of the very simple, basic things that we can use. Yes, we've got the technology, we've got Meets, Zoom, sophisticated technology, but simple things like TV and radio broadcasts, just simple things like WhatsApp groups, creating groups on Facebook. I'm also a librarian. We've got immense support of librarian groups on Facebook. And for schools that do not have digital libraries, we didn't know what to do when we were told to stop issuing out books. So Facebook helped. People would come up with lists of where we could find reading material to keep, students reading. Messages, Instagram, blogs, and simple email could be ways that we could share and transfer knowledge among ourselves as a community of practice, of teachers, of subject experts, of a common department, across departments. And yeah, what I really would like to emphasize now is that connectedness and the power that is inherent in us, in our tacit knowledge that we can share among ourselves to improve our practice and hopefully help us stay ahead of the competition.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much, Moira. Maybe just one quick follow-up question, and maybe if you could summarize it just briefly. You mentioned about the importance of maintaining the relationships with learners. So you've spoken a lot about teachers and the professional learning communities. How have you seen that happen within your school? How often are you speaking with learners? What communication tools are you seeing to make that happen? And what kind of response are you getting back from learners as a result?
We are back at school now, but when we were away from school, would see our learners in different settings 5 days a week. So we changed our tutor system into a horizontal tutor system and a vertical tutor system. A horizontal tutor system where you would have kids of the same age, like all Form 2s, 20 Form 2s per tutor, and a horizontal system where you see them mixed from Form 1 to Form 5, that's grade 8 to matric, and would connect with them on a daily basis to find out if they are coping with online learning. And it was also mandatory to check in with the parents, because some parents were also struggling with it, from sharing devices, sharing the house. Suddenly everyone is at home, mom, dad, and the kids are working from home. Just checking if everything was going okay, checking if the kids were managing, were keeping pace. So tutors would connect with them, almost on a daily basis in different, of course, in different groups, which was very important. And because the kids, on one hand, the kids were enjoying being home, but on the other hand, it's a boys' school. They wanted to be back at school. So every tutor meeting, they will be expectant. They will be expecting to hear the news that, okay, you're coming back to school on Monday, which was not for a long time. But they were always looking forward to those interactions. And it was to interact with the tutor, but also to interact with the peers, because that was the only platform that they could see them. And we used the Google Meet and WhatsApp groups.
Okay, brilliant. Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to quickly just move on to the next question that has been sent to you via the Mentimeter. So how have you ensured that your students keep the value of reading amid COVID-19 protocols? So if you'd like to be able to share a little bit on that. You're welcome to send back some responses. I think we'll just give us just a minute to maybe input some responses there, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. Okay, so we've got a virtual book club, some daily interactions on WhatsApp groups. Again, using Google Classroom as a platform. A virtual book bingo during lockdown, fantastic. Media took a backseat, so sadly you didn't get to the core content. So been sending docs via WhatsApp, using resources like Funza and other story reading apps, and then also looking at some weekly readings. Okay, so I think we're going to move back to our next speaker. So Frankie, it's over to you, and Frankie's going to be speaking around a little bit around how we embrace change also as teachers in this sort of role-changing world. Over to you, Frankie.
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you so much. Karen, I just want to say she always says, let's play. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you guys tonight. I'm going to show you guys how to play a little bit with Google tools to create more impactful lessons. I'm just going to share my screen quickly with you. Okay, let me just quickly go here. Karen, there seems to be a little bit of a technical difficulty. I'm just going to rejoin quickly the meeting.
Brilliant. So just in the meantime, whilst Frankie leaves and comes back, if you have any other questions that you'd like to pop through, please send those through, and we'll keep populating them on the side, and then we'll get to some of the questions in a few minutes.
And I'm back.
Brilliant.
Okay, I'm just going to put it in presenter mode quickly.
Thanks, Frankie.
It's busy going into presenter mode. Technology is amazing, but when you want to use it. Lauren, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and you can now see my slideshow.
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Yay!
Oh, so
Okay.
cute.
I'm sorry about that, everyone. So, like I said before, I love it. Karen said we're going to play, and that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to play a little bit, and I'm going to focus on a few tools that will support learners and educators in their ever-changing roles. COVID-19 has certainly changed us, and has changed us for the better. And it will be super sad if you continue doing as you did before. Traditionally, education was seen as teaching and learning of facts. The teacher would teach the facts, and the learners would learn them through memorizing. Then technology came along, and then technology and education was seen as teaching and learning facts. The teacher would teach the facts, and learners would learn them through memorizing. Does that sound very familiar? We need to ask the question, are we using technology merely as a substitute for traditional teaching? COVID-19 came along and certainly forced us as educators to embrace technology even more. It has encouraged us to rethink and reimagine education. It has also enabled us to reach our learners in captivating and impactful ways. It has enabled us to use technology for future thinking. Our roles have certainly changed. We are not just teachers. We are artists, creators, game changers, and forward-thinking innovators. I'm going to move quite quickly through the info because I only have 7 minutes. And Corin, I promise I won't sing for the audience to waste their time.
Oh.
So my message is our roles have certainly changed. And what tools can you use in this role changing and during this difficult time? Well, there are lots of innovative tools available online that you can use. A lot of them are free tools. There are freemium tools. I'm going to focus on one tool that you can use tonight that you can integrate into your Google Classroom, as well as PDF documents. But there are hundreds and hundreds of tools available online that you can look at. And the tool that I'm going to focus on tonight are Chrome extensions. Now, for those of you who do not know what a Chrome extension is, it is basically a little application or an add-on to your Chrome web browser that opens up a world of possibilities. Where do you find these amazing Chrome extensions? You simply go onto Google Chrome and make sure that you are signed in on your Gmail account. And then you simply go to the Chrome Web Store where you can search for hundreds and thousands of amazing Chrome extensions to make your lessons more interactive, more fun, more captivating. And then I just want to give you guys a few tips. And this is what stood out during the lockdown process. When you plan your lessons, the very first step that you need to do is, of course, decide on a theme or decide on a topic. In the example that I'm going to show you guys tonight, I chose the theme space. Then, very important, because you have so much to give your learners and so many activities to work out, break that activity up into parts. After you have broken up your activity into different parts, search for amazing extensions that will add value to your lesson. Remember, where do I get those extensions? I simply go to the Chrome Web Store. And after that, you introduce small ideas or challenges within your activity to make it captivating for learners. Because remember, you're not one-on-one, you're in the classroom with them. You're now working from a distance remotely. So it's important that you make small changes to your activities that will captivate them. And that is my message that I want to bring you tonight. And the one tool that I want to focus on, or the Google extension, is called Kami. Now, Kami has been recommended by thousands of teachers from around the world. And what that basically does, it turns a normal PDF document, which you can create in Google Docs and download as a PDF, into an interactive challenge or work piece. It is fantastic. I'm going to show you the example now. So it's the #1 recommended PDF editor in the education space, and it's a freemium extension, which means once you sign up, you get a 30-day trial. However, you have the option after the trial, if you want to make use of the paid version, you can still make use of the free version, which will give you basic functions, but those basic functions are more than enough to keep your learners captivated and to help you create a PDF document that is superb. Once you have downloaded the Kami extension onto your Chrome web browser, you need to complete the following steps. And remember, just a side note, for your learners to be able to use Kami, they will also have to install the plugin, or not, it's not really a plugin, it's an extension to their Chrome web browser. After you installed it, you can find any PDF document online, or like I said earlier, you can create a document in Google Docs, save it as a PDF, and then open it with Kami. Once the extension is installed, a new little toolbar at the top will open up, and it will ask you to open with Kami. Are you guys ready to see Kami? Let's see. By the way, if you guys have any questions about any part of my presentation, please leave your question in the comment section. So remember, the first step is I'm going to get a PDF document. Now, I created this PDF document in Google Docs, and I saved it as a PDF, and I uploaded it to my drive. Then from my drive, I opened the PDF document in Kami, and look at that amazing toolbar that opens on the left. Now, what does that toolbar allow you to do? Amazing things. You can leave comments. Within your PDF document, you can add questions for learners, but in a more interactive way. You can add video comments like I did there. For example, to introduce my activity, I made a little video of myself. So it's just nice, instead of just giving learners activities in a PDF document to do, it gives it a nice personalized touch if the teacher adds videos of him or herself. So that's basically why I introduced the activity. Karen, I'm going to play the video. If you can just say yes, if you can hear the sound.
No.
Okay, so basically what I did there, I said, today you are going to go on an amazing journey. You need to help Captain Copy and Alien Paste complete the challenges. So as you can see through this activity, I wanted to show them, or I wanted to teach them keyboard shortcuts. This is for the younger grades. How to copy using shortcuts, how to paste using shortcuts, Control-C, Control-V, and I turned it into an interactive lesson. So once again, it's important. Take a normal lesson. I could have easily just given them information about the activity, about copying and pasting, or I could make a small change to my activity and make the activity instantly interactive. And then how do I make it even more amazing? I searched for a Google extension like Camming. So I added a little video, and within your other activities, you can add more mini activities. I asked them, for example, here, what are tools? Leave a video comment with your answer. So the learners will see this exact document with all the little questions that I added into the PDF document, and they can then add their own things from the toolbar on the left into the answer blocks. I said here, what are tools? Leave a video comment with your answers. So instead of having learners type out the answer, to make it more interactive, they can physically leave a video comment. And then it's very important when you do your planning to teach our learners from a young age to problem solve. So the problem that I gave them was to go on these different missions, and what do they need to solve the problem? They need their tools. So here on their own, they can give a definition of the word tools. I asked them a creative question. What sound does a spaceship make? What are the 8 planets in our solar system? So I focused a little bit on facts, but the majority of the activities that I added here are interactive. If you look at the second part of the PDF document, if you had to add your own planet to our solar system, what would it look like? So the learners will simply go to a drawing, and they can then draw their own creative planet in that section. Wow, that's a beautiful planet. And then at the next part, I say, draw a picture showing how you feel about COVID-19. Very important when you do your lesson planning that you bring some sort of real life situation or scenario into your activity. And from a young age, this teaches them to work through their emotions, to talk about real life things and to work through their emotions. So here they will draw a happy face, or a sad face, or a scared face. And in my video on the right, I actually made different facial expressions to represent emotions. And I told them it's okay to feel scared or uncertain about COVID-19, but there must always be a solution to the problem. Here I said, design a mask that will protect Alien Paste and Captain Copy against COVID-19. I also turned that question into a video question, and they can also reply via video, submitting their own video. So remember, when you do your planning, it's important that you break up your activity into different parts. I'm going to mention that a lot tonight. Break your activity up into little challenges to keep them captivated. The next part of the activity is they need to complete level 2, and they can simply click on this link. And this time I used Google Slides. I made a normal presentation, but I made it a little bit more interactive, and I turned it into a little bit of a game. Remember, we're focusing on Captain Copy, Control-C for copy, and Alien Paste, Control V, paste. So now when they click on that link after they submitted the first level, I turned the whole experience into a little story. So I'll say level 2, welcome to the second part of your challenge. I took them back to the slide, which had all my different tools. And remember, they gave their own definition of tools in the previous section. And I can comment on that. I can tell them if they are on the right track. So they already have this knowledge. So I don't have to physically teach this activity to them. They already have previous knowledge based on level 1. And then, like I said, I turned it into a story. One day on a planet far, far away lived a friendly alien called Alien Paste. They go through the different sections of the story, and then I gave them little challenges to do, focusing on the skill, their keyboard skills, keyboard shortcuts, copying and pasting. So I asked them, copy and paste what Alien Paste needs to go to Earth. So level 1 taught them that tools are things that we use to solve problems. So how are they going to solve this problem? They go back to slide 2 and they copy, Control C, Control V, and they move the element into the square. I've added a few of those challenges.
Sorry, Frankie, I'm just a little bit conscious of time. It's rolling on.
I'll be quick. Just a minute. So basically what I did was I gave them different challenges. I also made use of mini videos within my activities, once again, to give them a personalized experience. And then at the end, they had to reassemble the spaceship. So this is basically just to show you that you can make small changes to your activity to create a big impact. Karen and then will also share all the links to my presentation. I've added a PDF document or a Google slide with more Chrome extensions that you guys can look at, as well as the example of level 1 and level 2, Captain Copy and Alien Paste. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Frankie. That's really inspiring to see how you've brought so many different aspects of technology into one lesson. And I think that's where some of that professional learning communities or kind of knowledge sharing can come in, is that as we create different lessons, we share it across so that we don't end up having to recreate everything, but we can actually learn from each other and work through that. I'm going to skip our final question and actually just move straight on to our final speaker in Tracy, who's going to be speaking a little bit about maths education in particular, and some of the learnings that she's seen in some of her research as well. So over to you, Tracy.
Thanks so much, and inspiring to listen to my fellow panelists, particularly talking about the challenges of connecting and collaborating and keeping it all personal, because I think that is one of the threats of our distance learning, I see a big opportunity, really, that the COVID-19 disruption to schooling has an opportunity that it offers us, really, and that is that pretty much everybody is concerned about the learning backlogs that 2020 learners might have. They haven't been at school for many months, and have they been able to keep up on their own? What are the repercussions of them not having been in the classroom every day? And I've spent the last 9 years really looking at learning backlogs, particularly in maths and in science, but amongst high school learners. And it's been an extraordinary learning journey so far. Those existing backlogs come from very early years, and a lot of people haven't been aware of them. A lot of teachers are aware that learners have gaps, but they don't realize how far back they go. And so this focus on what they've missed over these first few months is an opportunity really to have a look at maybe what they've missed over all the years before where they are now, because I just like to share some of the findings that I've had and just how startling they are. So one of those was really an opportunity last year where we had an NGO that actually did a randomized sample of learners from 23 different schools in KZN. It was a decent sample, about 2,500 learners. And what was interesting about those learners is they spanned all the high school grades from grade 8 through to grade 12. And they all did the same diagnostic assessment to measure what grade level they were functioning on in mathematics. And I hope that I'm going to be Eugene's doing it for me. Thank you. So I wanted to share that slide, and this is actual data that we worked with. And I just want to quickly show you because, there's so much concern at the end of every year as to how poorly our grade 12s do, and particularly in maths. And so these were these 2,500 learners. They all did the same diagnostic assessment. They're supposed to be over here, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, in terms of their maths proficiency. But look at what we actually measured. We found that the grade 8 learners were actually 4 years behind where they should be. And that finding actually has been borne out by other work that Nick Spall particularly has done, finding that grade 7s and grade 9s were 4 years behind, our grade 9s 4 years behind, our grade 10s 4 years behind, and then this really was an eye-opener for me, that actually the grade 11s were 5 years behind and the grade 12 6 years behind. And that actually really is at the heart of our challenges in maths education, because if you imagine that many of the grade 12 learners are actually functioning at grade 6 level, it's really difficult for them to master their maths curriculum. They rely on rote learning. Frankie referred to our original idea of education really as a teacher teaches and the learner memorizes the facts that the teacher shares. And in fact, that isn't the way learning happens, and we know that. And to make learning happen where actually there's engagement between the teacher and the learner, where the teacher actually knows what the learner knows and understands already and doesn't, and is able to take them from that point where they are to where they need to be at their grade level work. That's the great challenge really in being an educator, in making a difference in kids' lives. And in my working with high school learners who've been 4 to 8 years even behind in some cases, what I've found is that the key to actually catching up those learning backlogs is engaging the learner and sharing all the data that you actually have. Because actually, if you share with learners what it is that they know, what it is that they don't know, and what it is that they're supposed to know in a clear fashion, then actually they start to understand their own personal process of learning, and guiding them through their own analysis of their results, of their responses to questions, gives them that insight into what actually is expected of them in terms of making understanding of something. And through that process, we actually are developing their metacognitive skills. Eugene mentioned at the beginning, my big interest, my big learning in the last few years is that actually, if you can actually develop learners' metacognitive skills, that they understand how they learn, what they need in order to learn, how to access the resources for learning to make their own personal understanding, then you're building that independent, self-sustaining, lifelong learner. And if you think about it, you know, a lot of people think that teachers' job is to cover a curriculum, to fill learners' heads with the grade level content. And we've had a lot in the news over the last few years about the sort of 4IR and fourth industrial revolution, and how do we prepare learners for jobs that don't exist? What do we teach them? What's important to teach them? What do we leave out? Actually, my learning through this process, and I'm still on this journey, it will be a lifelong journey, I'm sure, is that actually empowering learners to take agency, to own their own understanding, to direct their own learning. In this way, they actually become those independent, successful, sustaining learners. And in this way, they become valuable citizens in what is an uncertain future. And is that not really the core business of a teacher, to actually upskill learners to manage their own learning? Because to be successful in this world going forward, we need people who actually can be agile thinkers and make their own understanding and learning in whatever they're called on to do at that point in time. So I see a great opportunity in the pandemic and the lockdown and the disruption to schooling to actually use that opportunity to track back and look at where those learning gaps are and engage learners in catching those up, and in the process teach them how to actually analyze their own thinking, their own understanding, and manage their own learning. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tracy. I see a couple of comments of kind of questions around the potential of sharing more, and I think there'll definitely be some opportunity with that. And maybe just to say as well, I think you know, there's been some really great success of actually managing to catch up those gaps that Tracy outlined. And so it shouldn't be something that we feel almost hopeless about, but it is actually a great opportunity to move forward with some of the work that Tracy's working on. I'm very conscious about time, and I know that we have evenings to get to, and so yeah, unfortunately, just because we have run a little bit over, we're not able to get to many of the questions, but we'd love to be able to circle back in the future. And maybe part of what you can help us with is there are two things that just before you leave. The first is that there will be some notes that we send out from this webinar, and I think Karen will drop it in the link, and we'll actually send it out tomorrow as well. But then to also say that you know, if this is something that you have found valuable, we'd love to be able to offer further webinars, and I'm just going to drop a link into the chat as well, just to say that there's an opportunity to perhaps give some feedback. We'd love to be able to improve and serve you all as a teaching community even better through this time. So thank you again for everybody who's joined us. Thank you for everybody as our panelists, to Karen, to Frankie, to Moira, to Tracy. We really appreciate your insights, and we just hope that this has sparked some fresh thinking as we head toward the second half of the year. And yeah, if you have any comments, please do leave it on the evaluation sheet that we've sent. We'd love to be able to build this as a community and share more thinking going forward. So thank you to each one of you. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll be in touch soon again. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.